So there's this one guy, like we're waiting for the band to come on, and this one guy like starts like puking everywhere. So immediately everybody just spreads out. And so one guy's like, oh look, a perfect circle.
New Kids on the Block was my first show ever. I was in 3rd grade, and my mom and aunt took my sister and I, and we were both so down with New Kids on the Block. And it was right around Christmas, so they had this Christmas album out. But my first metal show was Megadeth in '95, and my dad and uncle took me and all my little friends and all our bowl cuts. And it was Fear Factory opening on Demanufacture, which was awesome. Korn, who I had no idea who they were at the time, but I was blown away. And then Megadeth. So yeah, that was awesome.
I actually got to see a couple of bands and artists with my father when I was really young. I think one of the ones that stands out that might be my first like kind of concert thing was Eric Burden, funny enough, from Eric Burden and the Animals. And it was at a place called The Turning Point in Rockland County in Piermont, New York. And he was so hammered that he almost fell on me, and my father had to catch him. And then the first big concert I got to see, Blind Melon, Soundgarden, and Booker T and the MGs with Neil Young. Every band on it like was so important to me. I just like, when I got to tour with Coheed on that Soundgarden tour, I was just like, should I bring the ticket or not? And then I was like, fuck it, I'm doing it. And I brought the ticket. And everybody was kind of like, you know, they were touched, if you will, that that it was such an important moment to me. And I waited till the end of his tour, of course, before I dorked out like that.
Molly Hatchet at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center in Poughkeepsie, New York, in like sometime in the mid-'80s. I like their album covers because they have like, you know, Conan the Barbarian and swords and dudes riding horses and stuff. And I thought, this is like the kind of music I like, because I'm just starting to get into heavy metal music and hard rock. I went with my dad, actually. We got the tickets and we went to go to the show, and Molly Hatchet played, and they were awesome. Weren't really exactly what I was looking for. Wasn't that familiar with their music at the time. I just knew they had cool album covers. And I just remember everybody was like smoking a lot of weed, and me and my dad got contact high.
It was Kanye West and John Legend. John Legend opened. I didn't know who John Legend was at the time, and no one kind of knew. And he did Ordinary People. He blew my mind because you know Ordinary People. I've never heard the song before, and I was like, and I just would have never thought that he would have opened for Kanye West. The whole thing was just like a whole mind. The thing I remember the most about Kanye's performance, in conjunction with who he is right now, is funny because he's always been this arrogant. There's like when people go, I like the old Kanye, I'm like, the old Kanye was the same Kanye.
I remember sneaking out of my friend's bedroom. I think we were like 8, maybe 9 or something. We were really young. We went down the street, lived in a super small town, and it was at like the American Legion. And it was this like country western band, whatever, but they had lights and a smoke machine. And that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I didn't care about the music. I was like, wow. And they looked so huge. They looked like action figures, just really big, and big hats, big beards, and tight pants. And I was like, I wanna do that. And I think the first real show I'd seen was 311. And that was awesome. Don't laugh.
So the first show I ever went to was the first S&M concert in Madison Square Garden for Metallica. You know, as I find out later, it was very quaint for a Metallica show. You know, everybody's seated, there's a symphony orchestra there. Coincidentally, my next show was Metallica again. I saw them at Tattoo the Earth, which was like a completely different set of circumstances. Like, it was like super crazy and violent, and you know, there were other bands on the bill like Slayer, Sepultura, Slipknot. That was the first time I was at a show and just got the absolute shit kicked out of me. Yeah, I think the guy from Slipknot stage dove and kicked me directly in the face.
In New York, they had 923 K-Rock, and they would sometimes throw these 92-cent shows, the 92 free shows. And the first show that I ever went to was one of those. It was, headliner was System of a Down, and it was Kitty, and it was this band, 8 Stop 7. What I remember most specifically, and I'd never been to a show before, so I thought this was a normal thing, but the crowd seemed to really not like 8 Stop 7, so there were literally people like throwing bottles and shit at them, and I was like, what the fuck, is this normal? Then they pull out the acoustic guitar. People start booing so fucking loud when the acoustic guitars come out, so the crowd just starts chanting SOU over the fucking song, which SOU, if you don't know, is the other station around here that comes out here from Seton Hall that plays heavier music than K-Rock did. So that was just drowning out that fucking song.
The very first concert I went to was at the Greek Theater in Berkeley, California. And if I remember right, it was called the Bread and Roses Festival, a very Berkeley thing, folk all the way. And the headliner was Pete Seeger. Yeah, it wasn't exactly like seeing AC/DC for your first concert. When I first went to a concert by choice, it was Kiss.
The very first show I attended was at the VFW hall in my hometown of Centereach. Long Island has a pretty rich hardcore history, and I got to see some pretty cool bands pretty early on. But the very first show was at that VFW hall in my town, and it was a band called Shutdown, 1 for 1 from New Jersey. Glassjaw played that show, and the band called Motive. Back then too, like you had kind of like very little information about the shows in general. It changed, it blew my mind. Like it made everything just so like tangible to me, because I was like, holy shit, like this is happening literally in my backyard.
My friends took me to a ska show, and then there was this one heavy metal band in the middle of all these ska bands. And then this one band came on, and I remember them so well because I just saw more and more members come on. There was just that prototypical, like, oversized ska band where they probably each took home 50 cents a piece after the door. They were called the World Inferno Friendship Society. Their name was as fucking long as their band. They probably had the same amount of letters as they did members. And they were amazing. My mind was fucking blown. Ska show. First show was a ska show. But there was a metal band in there, don't judge me.
The first show I went to was in Philadelphia at the Trocadero. I think it must have been like 91, 92. Was House of Pain. Pretty lit show. My older brother took me to see it. Rage Against the Machine actually opened for them before their first record came out. My brother put me on his shoulders because it was like there was a mosh pit during their whole set, and it had been the first time I'd ever been in any kind of scenario like that, so I was terrified.
I think like the first concert I went to, I remember, was Victor Borge, who's he's like this Danish pianist that does sort of comedy and classical music, and then my first metal show, it's kind of embarrassing actually, it was like a band that I didn't actually like. It was Linkin Park. I was just like 14 and I was so desperate to go to a show. I was just like, oh my god, something's coming to New Zealand, and bought a ticket. And then, but I think that like the first show I went to that was actually like a band that I definitively wanted to see was Tool, and that was probably a few months later.
My like very first show was, I think, like that I can remember, was Willie Nelson at the Cape Cod Melody Tent. No offense to Willie Nelson, I think he's like super cool now. Like I would totally like love to hang out, but like at the time, I just like, it wasn't like I wanted to go see Willie Nelson. And I don't even think like, I think my grandparents took me. I don't think they even really cared about Willie Nelson. It's like, but he was like the name, and it was like, oh, he's playing the Cape Cod Melody Tent. Gotta, you know, bring David to see Willie Nelson. And I just remember like, just like not really getting it.
First show I went to was at the legendary CBGBs. It was Trip Six, New York Hoods, and Underdog. I remember my first show going up to CB's and like seeing the doors, right? You see the doors, it just looks like an old saloon with like concrete, and there's some wood. And the doors are actually fucking old wooden ass doors with like metal handles. But as soon as you get like 6-8 feet from the front door, literally you feel like energy and heat, like literal heat. Like I remember feeling like my chest felt compressed. And fucking, I was like, wow, this is crazy, you know? And it felt like, you know, there was obviously a set of rules that I didn't know, right? And so I'd had some catching up to do, and that was kind of exciting. So yeah, it felt dangerous. You know, I was scared, I was hot. Winter, summer, spring, it was always hot, like sweaty hot, like shirt stuck to you hot.
What I was saying before about how like you had very little information about shows, like that actually like bit me in the ass like a couple, like maybe within that same year. It was at that same VFW, similar situation. Like I had just heard that there was a show at the VFW on a, you know, whatever night, and I showed up, no idea who was even playing. I just heard there was a show, wearing a Sick of It All t-shirt. And then I get to the show and I find out, oh, Sick of It All is playing this show. So like an idiot, I'm the guy that showed up inadvertently in the shirt of the band I was going to see. Yeah, pretty cool.